Let's start this deep dive with a prayer, God, as we go through this devotional in John 14:6. Open our minds and our hearts to your truth and help us see just how much your hope can apply to our lives today, even when things feel so chaotic and uncertain. Yeah.
Amen.
All right, so today we're going to be diving into the idea of hope in Jesus. We're going to be using this devotional for January 19th as our guide. And you know what really stood out to me was that idea of unwavering hope, which is something I think we all need a lot more of in this world right now.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where John 14:6 comes in,
Right.
right? When Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That's a pretty bold statement. I mean, you don't really hear that kind of exclusivity these days.
Yeah, that's true. It's not
That's
exactly a message that's super popular right now. But the devotional really leans into this idea. It actually uses this verse as like the foundation for why Jesus is the source of hope, not just one of many.
And what's really interesting is how the devotional takes this idea and connects it to this really universal human experience of feeling lost. I mean, we've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, just last week, I spent like 20 minutes wandering around Target trying to find the toothpaste aisle. Not exactly a
Same.
spiritual crisis or anything, but
Yeah, right.
definitely a lost in the aisles moment for sure.
Exactly. But imagine that feeling, but amplified by like 1,000. That feeling of being totally cut off from whatever gives you meaning, from whatever grounds you feel. And that's kind of the lostness that the devotional is talking about. It's that separation from God that happens because of sin.
And then it brings in this image of Jesus as the way, which I think is so powerful. It's not about us having to follow a bunch of rules or earn our way back to God.
Mm.
It's about a person. It's about a relationship.
Yeah, and it's interesting how this connects to other parts of the Bible too. Like when you think about that image of the shepherd going after the lost sheep in Luke 15, or Jesus calling himself the good shepherd in John 10, it's this idea of being sought after, being guided, being brought back into the fold.
So even if we're the ones who wandered off, God is still actively pursuing us. That's pretty hopeful.
It is. And it gets even more interesting when we start to think about Jesus as the truth. It's not just about finding our way back to God, but also aligning ourselves with this ultimate reality, with a truth that's bigger than our own limited perspectives.
Okay, so this is where I get a little tripped up because we live in this world where everyone's always talking about my truth and your truth. It's like truth has become totally relative.
Yeah.
So how does Jesus fit into all of that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, it's something Christians have been wrestling with for centuries. But what I find so compelling about this devotional is that it presents Jesus not just as someone who speaks truth, but as truth embodied.
So it's not just about the things he said, but who he was as a person.
Exactly. The devotional points out that everything about Jesus' life, his actions, his teachings, they all pointed to this deeper reality about God and about our relationship with him.
It makes me think about all those fake news warnings you see online. Like how do you even begin to sort through all of that? Maybe that's where this idea of Jesus as the truth comes in. It's like having this ultimate standard that you can measure everything else against.
That's a great way to put it, and I think it's something we'll definitely want to unpack a bit more. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's circle back to this idea of Jesus as the way for a second. What does that even mean for someone who's trying to figure out, how to make decisions in their life today? It's funny you should mention making decisions, because one of the things that really struck me about the devotional was how it emphasized Jesus as the way and how that connects with this really basic human need for direction. We all want some kind of roadmap, some guiding principles to help us navigate life.
That's so true. Like I was just reading this article about how Gen Z is apparently ditching Google Maps and relying more on social media for directions. They'd rather trust some random TikToker's travel vlog than an algorithm.
That's wild. But it also kind of makes sense, right? It speaks to this deep desire we all have for a trusted source, someone who can help us make sense of the world, even if it's just something as simple as, finding the best pizza place in town.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
But how does the devotional tie this need for direction to the idea of hope?
Well, when you think about all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, like climate change, political polarization, all the economic uncertainty, it's no wonder people are feeling lost and kind of aimless. The devotional seems to be saying that in the middle of all of that, Jesus offers a different kind of compass, one that points us towards something solid, something that won't let us down.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
But wouldn't some people say that relying on faith for direction is kind of like, using a wishing well as a GPS? It's
Yeah.
all based on belief,
Yeah.
not on anything tangible.
That's a fair point, and it's actually something that the devotional addresses head on. It emphasizes that believing in Jesus as the way isn't about blind faith. It's about putting your trust in someone who's already walked the path, someone who's overcome the same challenges we face.
So it's less about following a set of abstract rules and more about following a model for how to live.
Exactly, and I think that's where the concept of discipleship comes in. It's not just about believing in Jesus, but about actively learning from him, imitating his example, and letting his teachings shape the way we make decisions and the things we do.
So in a way, Jesus as the way becomes kind of like an ethical framework for figuring out how to handle those tough moral dilemmas.
Right. And what's really interesting is that it's not always about having all the answers laid out in front of you. The devotional actually challenges us to grapple with, the complexity of trying to live out our faith in a world that doesn't always make it easy.
Which brings us back to Jesus as the truth. In a world where everyone seems to have their own version of the truth, how do we find something solid to hold on to? I feel like we're constantly being bombarded with misinformation, conspiracy theories, and just conflicting narratives. It's exhausting.
Yeah. It really is. And the devotional doesn't sugarcoat that at all. It acknowledges that there's this overwhelming cacophony of voices out there, all competing for our attention and all claiming to have the answer.
So how do we do what the devotional suggests? How do we anchor ourselves in Jesus as the truth amidst all that noise? Does it mean we just ignore everything else and only focus on the Bible?
I don't think it's quite that simple. I think the devotional is encouraging us to develop a more critical lens, a way of discerning truth from falsehood that's based on something deeper than just our own opinions or whatever's trending on Twitter.
So it's not about blindly accepting things, but about, informed discernment.
Exactly. And I think that's where studying the Bible, engaging with the teachings of Jesus, and having conversations with other believers becomes so important. It helps us sharpen our ability to recognize truth, even when it comes in a package we're not used to.
That makes me think about how Jesus often taught using parables. He didn't always give straightforward answers. He kind of invited people to wrestle with the meaning behind his words.
Yeah, you're right. It's like he was challenging people to move beyond a superficial understanding of truth as just, a set of doctrines and to embrace it as this living, breathing reality that we constantly discover and explore.
So we've talked about the way and the truth, but the devotional doesn't stop there. It goes on to explore this whole other dimension of Jesus, this idea of him being the life. What does that even mean?
That's where things get really profound. The devotional pushes us to go beyond just understanding Jesus intellectually and to actually encounter him as the source of real life, a life that goes beyond our limited human experience.
Oh, now you're getting all mystical on me. Can you break that down a bit? What does that look like in real life?
I think it starts with recognizing that the kind of life Jesus offers isn't just about living a long time. It's about a fundamental shift in our being, a change in how we see the world, how we prioritize things, and even what we think it means to be truly alive.
So it's not just about going to heaven when we die. It's about experiencing a different kind of life right here, right now.
You got it. The devotional even quotes Jesus himself, where he says, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." It's this idea that through a relationship with him, we can tap into this source of joy, peace, and purpose that goes beyond the temporary pleasures and successes of this world.
But is that really possible? I mean,
Yeah.
look at what's going on around us. There's so much suffering, injustice, and just plain chaos. How can we even talk about life to the full when so many people are barely surviving?
That's the paradox, isn't it? The devotional doesn't try to downplay the difficult realities of living in a broken world, but it also presents this radical idea that even in the middle of all the pain and suffering, even when we're confronted with our own mortality, there's something deeper, a source of life that can sustain us, transform us, and give us hope that extends beyond the limits of our earthly existence.
It's a pretty bold claim, but it's also incredibly hopeful, especially in a world that often feels pretty hopeless. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I think we should probably take a break. We can pick this conversation back up in the next part of the deep dive and really unpack what this idea of Jesus as the life means for us, practically speaking. Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle this whole idea of Jesus as the life. It's a pretty profound concept, don't you think?
Yeah, it really is. And the devotional does a great job of highlighting the paradoxical nature of it all. On the one hand, we have this undeniable reality of death, our own mortality. But then on the other hand, there's this promise of a life that goes beyond all of that, a life that's connected to something eternal.
It reminds me of all those memes and stuff you see about living your best life. It's all about,
Yeah.
maximizing experiences, achieving goals, trying to squeeze every last drop of enjoyment out of this earthly existence. But what the devotional is talking about seems so much deeper than that.
I agree. And I think that's where the distinction between bios and zoe comes in. Bios is that Greek word for biological life, the kind of life that we all experience as physical beings. But zoe refers to something different. It's about spiritual life, a life that's rooted in God and characterized by things like love, joy, peace, and purpose.
So it's not so much about how long we live, but about the quality of our lives.
Exactly. And the devotional makes the point that Jesus embodies this Zoe life and offers it to us as a gift. It's not something we have to earn or achieve. It's something we receive through faith.
But if that's true, why do so many Christians still live lives that seem, well, like kind of ordinary? If we have access to this Zoe life, shouldn't it be more obvious? Shouldn't we be walking around radiating joy and peace all the time?
That's a really good question. And I think it gets to the heart of what it actually means to follow Jesus. The devotional doesn't portray Zoe life as this, magical switch that flips the moment we believe. It's a journey, a process of transformation that happens over time, and it often involves both incredible highs and some really tough lows.
So it's not about reaching some state of spiritual perfection.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the messiness of growth and change.
Right. And the devotional emphasizes that this transformation happens as we draw closer to Christ, as we allow his teachings to shape our thoughts, our actions, and our relationships. It's about becoming more and more like him, allowing his Zoe life to flow through us.
It's kind of like those before and after photos you see for those fitness programs or home renovations. There's this dramatic transformation that looks like it happened overnight.
Right.
But in reality, there was probably a lot of hard work, discipline, and perseverance that went into making that change.
That's a great analogy. And I think the devotional is saying that experiencing Zoe life isn't passive. It takes effort, discipline, and a willingness to surrender our own desires to God's will.
So it's not enough to just believe the right things. We have to actively live them out.
Exactly. And the devotional highlights this by emphasizing the importance of prayer-seeking guidance from the Holy Spirit and being part of a community of believers who can support and encourage us along the way.
One thing that really stood out to me in the devotional's closing prayer was that line, "May I be a conduit of your hope and life to a world desperately in need." It's a beautiful image of how this Zoe life isn't just about our own personal transformation, but about becoming a source of hope and life for other people.
Yeah, it's like that saying, you can't keep a good thing to yourself. When we experience the transformative power of Jesus' love and grace, it naturally overflows into our relationships, our communities, and even our interactions with complete strangers.
So it's not just about escaping the darkness ourselves. It's about bringing light into the world.
Perfectly said. And I think that's where the true power of hope in Jesus lies. It's not just a comforting thought or wishful thinking. It's a transformative force that has the potential to change not only our own lives, but the world around us.
This deep dive has been incredibly thought-provoking. We've explored so many different facets of hope in Jesus, from its foundation in John 14.6 to how it plays out in our everyday lives and even into eternity. I feel like I have a much richer understanding of what it means to truly embrace Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life.
Me too. And remember, this is just the beginning of the journey. The devotional encourages us to keep digging deeper into these ideas, to really immerse ourselves in the scriptures, to engage in meaningful conversations with our fellow believers, and to let this hope that we've been talking about shape our thoughts, our actions, and the way we interact with the world.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this challenge. How can you be a conduit of hope and life to those around you? What practical steps can you take today to embody the truth, follow the way, and share the life that Jesus offers? It's a question worth pondering, and I hope our conversation has given you something to think about and a renewed sense of hope for the journey ahead. And until time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the truth that sets us free.